Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Vidich.
Thank you. I don't think I've ever been in the same paragraph as Hilary Mantel, so I feel this is like a special event for me as well. I am Paul Vidich, as you just heard. I am a writer, and my most recent book is a book about secrets in marriages, among other things. So I'd like to ask which of you or who of you has kept a secret from your spouse or partner? Show of hands. Nobody. How many of you think your spouse has kept a secret from you? Okay, everyone. So I guess we're all being honest, a truthful audience. I haven't always been a writer, as you just heard, although I would say I actually always was a writer, but I masqueraded as a senior executive for a number of years. And it was only after I was financially able that I decided that I would quit my job, my corner office, and pick up writing, which I had wanted to do as a young man. And of course, it surprised all of my colleagues who said, when did that start? And of course, when you're a writer, it starts early. And it's the question of when you can take it out and put it into your life. In my case, I then got, to complement my MBA, I got an MFA, and then I started writing short stories and a novel and another novel, and that last novel, The Matchmaker, is the one I'm here to talk about. It's a story that sort of came to me through an interest I had in spies in Berlin. And you might ask, why Berlin? Berlin is an interesting, evocative city. It's a moody city. And it happens to be a place where, in the 20th century, that's where the spies were. From Kristallnacht in 1938 until the fall of the wall, it was a place where there was deception, there was treason, there was betrayal, all those things that are interesting for spy novelists. My novel is set at the end of the Cold War in 1989 when the wall falls. And it was a time when, if you know Germany, it was the Stasi, the secret police, were a major part of that country. And at that time, there were about 100,000 Stasi. There were about 1 million informers, which meant that about 1 in 7 Germans surveilled friends, family, colleagues, relatives, neighbors. And, we sometimes think of ourselves as being in a surveillance society. We've got technology that does all sorts of things. We have webcams on your computer that allows your employer to see whether you're paying attention. There are keystroke logs that allow people, your employers, to figure out which websites you're going to. Cell phones that track your every movement. Facial recognition technology that allows people in the airport to see who you are. But having said all of that, and for all of that, East Germany was even more surveillance-oriented. And my story sort of takes up that notion of surveillance and secrets. I got the inspiration for the story by reading the autobiography of a man by the name of Marcus Wolf. He was a German spy. He was the head of counterintelligence for the Stasi. A very smart man, a very clever man, an intelligent man, and a spy. And he, like most spies, sort of wear his deceptions and his lies like a finely tailored suit. And among the things that he did that impressed people is he came up with this notion of a Romeo Network. The Romeo Network was a series of young men who were trained to go to West Berlin and to West Germany and to identify young, vulnerable women. They may have had a drinking problem, they may have had a money problem, they may have had a love problem, they may have been depressed. But one thing they had in common is that they had some access to classified information. So these Romeos were sent to West Germany, and they met young women, fell in love with these young women, and they often married these young women. My novel is a story about one of these Juliets. In my case, the name of the woman is Anne Simpson. She was a young woman, American, who had gone to Germany with a husband, an American. They got divorced. She found herself alone and needed a job, so she became a translator with the U.S. Army. She was clever and smart, didn't like her work, but she needed a job. And in one of her more depressed moments, she had gone off to the resort in the Netherlands during the winter, which the grim mood of her life met the grim weather of the coast. And in a situation that she later had a lot of regret about, she met a young man who helped her in a moment of being a victim. Somebody had taken her purse, and then this person, Stefan Kohler, decides to help her out. And she finds affection for him. And in the process of the affection, they return to Germany, and they marry. And she's happy. She's this wonderful, handsome young man who's a musician. He's a piano tuner and a musician, sort of fills her life with joy. But marriages, we know, are complex things. When you enter a marriage, you sort of give up some of yourself to discover something about somebody else. And the best marriages or successful marriages work because there's honesty, there's respect, there's kindness. But what happens when what you think is the husband who loves you isn't? My wife and I have been married 40 years. I met her, in a little bit like the story in the novel, when we were working together in New York. We had both come from different places. We had to pay the rent, so we got jobs at a trade magazine company when there were still trade magazines. And I was sort of interested in her, but I wasn't interested in the job. And when I discovered that she was an editor by day and cabaret singer by night, she became very interesting to me. And we both sort of began to discover each other. I discovered things I didn't know about her. She had been in the Peace Corps, she'd been at Berkeley, she'd done drugs, and she had been previously married. And of course, I was curious about all of that. And now, 40 years later, what's surprising is I still am discovering things about her. Things that are little things, not big things, small things, but still things I didn't know. And it sort of comes to a place where, in some ways, you can never know anybody really well. You can know them to a certain level, and then you're always surprised by the things you don't know about people you think you know. That's the story of my novel. And in my case, this young woman discovers something profoundly upsetting about the person she thought she loved. She discovers that he has a wife in East Berlin. He has a child by another woman, and he's a spy for the Stasi. And what do you do when you wake up and discover this about the person that you thought you were in love with? And that's sort of the story of the novel. And of course, there are spies, and there's MI6, and there's the CIA, but the arc of the story really follows this young woman's discovery of this deception in her life. Now, in real life, there were real Juliets. One of them was a woman who upon discovering her husband's deception, confronted him, and he killed her, and then covered up the murder with a bungled robbery. Another woman who worked for the Ministry of Defense had a grudge against her boss, and when she discovered her husband was a spy, she became his accomplice and collaborator. And so you had this situation where you had victims of these deceptions. And in the case of Anne Simpson, the protagonist of my novel, she found a way to deliver justice for the crime that had been done against her. And that's the end of the novel. And that's my story. And thank you very much.